Hi, everyone. Welcome to our presentation of At the Crossroads of Agile and Automation. Eric and I are really excited to be here and have the opportunity to present to you today. We're going to do a quick brief introduction and then get into the material. My name is Joseph Scholz. I work for Capital One. I work outside of Philadelphia in our office, and I work with Eric on one of the cloud engineering teams, and I'm an Agile delivery lead, what some other people might call Scrum Master, depending on your implementation of Agile. But I'm totally on 3 teams in total, but all cloud engineering, and really excited to be with you here today.
And I'm Eric Schultz. I'm a senior software engineer at Capital One. The team that I'm on is primarily focused with cloud engineering and cloud compliance while improving the developer experience. I am also based out of the Wilmington, Delaware office, but I reside in the Philadelphia area.
Great. So just a quick agenda for you today. We're going to go over the background of why we needed to create this solution. And then really the two parts are, it's pretty straightforward, the Agile intent, and then how we integrated automation to really create a solution that was robust and scalable. So I'll take the Agile section, and then Eric will take the automation and some of the other pieces. But really quickly, the background, why we needed this solution was really based a lot on compliance. And so cloud compliance resources, we noticed that we had some opportunities. The way that we were doing things was largely through email. And we noticed that there was just an opportunity to kind of reduce the email overload and kind of incorporate Agile principles. And so we have a screenshot of this, what we like to call this white noise effect, what was happening with our emails. And you'll get some slides that have blurs on them. It's intentional. It's not just bad camera work, but it's just for compliance purposes. But what you're seeing here is what someone might have walked into on any given morning, a list of resources or remediation efforts. And it was just really hard to make sense of it and keep things organized. And so we knew that there was opportunities for improvement. Eric's going to go over a couple of the other opportunities that we had for compliance.
Yeah, the next opportunity that we had was being able to track the efforts and prioritize the efforts that teams were doing to remediate these resources. So essentially in the past, teams would see the notification via email. They would go resolve anything that they needed to. However, their efforts weren't tracked, and they also weren't prioritizing against their other backlog items. So we see that as one opportunity. Another opportunity is being able to automatically validate when the work has been completed. Previously, teams would manually reach out to somebody, or they'd have to do the validation themselves. In this scenario, what we really strive for is being able to automatically do that and closing out any work items that are open for non-compliant resources. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Joe, for the Agile intent.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So, that was the background. That was the state of, what we were doing. And Eric and I really, I just joined the team. It was maybe almost a couple years ago. And we were really just talking about, what would be a better way to do this process? Could we make it more agile? And so it started with just this conversation about what would it look like for this work to be incorporated into Agile principles or Agile workflows. And so we're just going to go over that quickly. Quick kind of level set or quick foundation. I know Agile nomenclature and hierarchy and process is different everywhere. For us, if you hear us say issue, it's just a generic term for a work item. Epic is going to be kind of a larger scale effort, and story is going to be the smaller pieces of work that make up that epic. So an epic, as you see the example, might be an Amazon machine image or AMI rehydration effort. And the stories in that epic or the pieces of that epic would be like all of the resources that need to be updated to the new machine image or rehydrated to the new machine image. So just a brief indication on the vocabulary we're going to be using. So moving along, our basic intent, as Eric and I talked through this, was what would be our ideal situation? And so you'll see some of the bullet points here, and then we'll go over them in more details. But consistency and organization, we really wanted to incorporate into established and known agile patterns. So it was, seamless for teams. We wanted contextual information on the stories, on the work, not just this is not right, but we wanted to give some background and some ways to be able to fix it. And we wanted control over the creation of the work. So we wanted to make sure that this was all coming from a single source of truth. And then we wanted insight into where we were in terms of tracking and metrics. So these are some of the agile things that we wanted. We thought, maybe we can get some of them, but some of them might be kind of, a dream. But we went on this journey anyway. So these were the things we wanted to do. And we'll get in a little bit more detail. So as we talk about consistent format, you see that we wanted to take it from an email format where, it's words and kind of script to something that is more digestible. So it's formatted in a way that you see AMI rehydration there. That would be the epic. You see who it's assigned to. The resource that is blurred out there is what the resource would be. So you get a lot of good information in a format that's consistent every time, and an overall value of what needs to happen without trying to read paragraphs of an email. So that was the first thing. Visualizing the work and involving the team. So we wanted to incorporate it into established agile frameworks and formats and visualizations. So teams are very familiar. You see Jameson, that's just kind of a fun team name that we have. So that's Eric and myself's team. So these would be, what we would look at every day as a team. And so incorporating it, you see it as Jameson, I think 2565 was the AMI rehydration. It just seamlessly came onto our workflow visualizations, and it became a regular conversation, not some additional thing that we had to somehow incorporate from email. It was there for us. And then moving on from visualizing the work, we wanted to, provide that context. So what would make it acceptable? So the acceptance criteria, prioritization through dates. So if Eric, you advance one more, you'll see we started adding the dates that we were expecting this to be done, any resources that teams could use to remediate, giving them all that information, all the tools they would need to be successful. And then if we go on here, we talk about single source of truth. And I do want to just take a second to say, at this time, none of this was established. So this was just all kind of discussions and whiteboarding and maybe saying like, could it look like this? So you're seeing kind of an after the fact product, but this was all really just, how are we going to do this? I mean, maybe we can do spreadsheets or manually create these, but we realized that wasn't scalable. So just giving a quick verbal preview of what Eric will get into is how we really took something that would have been neat at a, maybe a micro level, and how we were able to expand it into, a large scale effort and a scalable, resource and productivity. But back to single source of truth. So we wanted to have a parent project so that everyone knew where to look for this, so where to look for their resources. So we created this dedicated Agile parent project. Again, I can't show you the total board, but it basically was one RDT retail direct technology. So single source of truth for everyone to look for their resources that might, just need updating. We had a system account, and that allowed us to have administrative access. So if we needed to, update the approach, we'd be able to quickly, access the projects and make sure the teams had the most up-to-date information. You see reduce the noise there. As we started to get the information and the resources into the Agile framework, and Jira is the Agile tool we use. So if you see Jira, that's what it is. We're able to start eliminating those emails. So fewer and fewer emails, which was, kind of how this thing all started. And we added some customization as well, some labels and custom fields so that teams could quickly sort or use queries and dynamically kind of sort the work out for themselves in a customizable way. So these, again, were things that we said, wouldn't this be great? We know that they're available to us, but how are we going to get it out in kind of mass production? And so the last thing we knew that we could benefit from in the Agile space was the metrics for accountability. And so we really wanted to be able to take have teams be able to look not only on how they were doing, but kind of the large scale or the overall picture. And so that they could see, oh, we're doing really great with this effort, or perhaps like in this case, if they were one of the teams in progress, oh wow, like we're one of the teams that is not done yet. That could be okay based on the due date, but then it also might give them an idea of who could we kind of contact that has done this already, and kind of source some help here. So really just giving them the context and the information they would need to be the most efficient. So that leads us into the Crossroads solution. Those were all the things that we were hoping that we'd be able to do and implement. And Eric's going to talk us through really how that was able to happen on a brilliant engineering pathway that he created.
Of course, thank you, Joe. Yeah, so I'll cover the piece about how basically we took our Agile intent of how we wanted to distribute these tickets to teams that actually matched with their AWS resources with real live data. So the first thing that we implemented, we decided to create a Python package. The main reason we did this was for reusability, so that other teams could actually use this client for any of the Jira automation we built, or also some of the discovery clients. The discovery clients, their main job is to basically connect with Boto3, the AWS SDK for Python, and discover the non-compliant AWS resources in our accounts. We have several different AWS accounts that we need to pull data from. So it's important that we have these discovery clients for several different cloud controls. That way it's really easy to figure out what you need to fix. The next piece of this is the Jira Creator client, and this is reused amongst several different discovery clients. And essentially, this main job is to create, update, and close out stories. And for this, we integrated with the Jira REST API. That way, we can create the stories, update descriptions, assign the stories, assign epics, and some other functions that we wanted to do so that we could distribute these stories to the teams. Some more detail on the discovery clients is that, as I mentioned before, we have several different AWS accounts, so it's really important that we could, pull the non-compliant resources from all these different accounts and aggregate it into one results file. We try to create a discovery client per each different cloud control. One of the examples there is rehydration, which Joe was mentioning earlier is basically, when an EC2 instance, when you need to upgrade to the latest AMI version, that way you have the latest patches, and basically you're all up to date in your account there. So that's one of the controls. Another control would be encryption. Just if a team needs to encrypt any of the resources, we'd open up a separate and create a separate discovery client for that. Now, the return value that gets returned from these discovery clients is essentially just a JSON object, and you can see the example on the right-hand side here. It returns this, and all the resources are grouped by team. So here you can see team 1. Then after that, it would display an array of non-compliant resources that they need to resolve. Then you also see the same thing for team 2 as well, and that's just a small subset that we're displaying there. The way that we determine the team is we have AWS resource tags attached to each of these different instances that allows us to determine what team owns these different resources. We use this as a way to identify the owners, just because like I mentioned, we have several different accounts, just so that we can keep track of cost and any remediation actions that the teams need to take. Now, the Jira Creator client, as I mentioned before, we use the Jira REST API for this, but the input that gets passed into this is the output from the discovery client. So essentially, it'll pass into the Jira Creator client a JSON object that has each team as a key with the list of resources that it needs to fix. And it'll also pass in with that the cloud control, or also known as the epic. So for the cloud control, for rehydration, for instance, we have one epic that we will assign that story to after it gets created. As I mentioned before, we open up a story per team here, so that's why we categorize it that way. If you see the second picture on the right-hand side, you can see team 1 needs to resolve a encryption issue. And also the other main job of this Jira Creator client is to create, update, and close the stories. Now we're going to create the story if on our daily run there's no story that exists for that team already, or if the team already has a story open, but their story is already in closed status, we will create a new one for them. We will then update the story on the next daily run, if the story exists for that team, and also if the story is currently in the open status or in progress. And then the last thing we will do is it'll close the story, and this will basically compare the delta between two different runs. So let's say I have a daily run that runs on day one, and then a daily run that runs on day two. If team one has non-compliant resources in the first day, but they don't have them in the second day, it'll know that delta and it'll actually close out the stories for that team. And the way that we're able to basically maintain this data is using DynamoDB. So essentially within our database, we'll store a unique key with the cloud control, the team, and then we'll store the Jira issue or story ID. That way we know exactly which story is open and which one we need to update on each of those different daily runs. So the life of a story. It all starts with the creation of the story, and essentially we figured that out by using Boto 3, the AWS SDK, to gather those non-compliant resources, sorting by the team, opening up a Jira story for each team, um, and distributing out that way. The next step then is once a story gets created, we need to make sure that we have the correct accountability and assignment of these stories. Our company, we use ServiceNow to basically store our cloud records. So each team has their own record within ServiceNow, and that gives you information like engineering lead, product owner, agile delivery lead, all the different roles on a given team, so that you can identify, the exact person that things need to be assigned to. So we use this to assign the story to the engineering lead. And then we have additional custom fields and then also labels where we'll assign things like the product owner and agile delivery lead, which is the role that Joe is on our team. The next thing is assigning the epic to the story. So as mentioned by this, we have an epic per cloud control. So an example of this would be rehydration or encryption. And this is just a way that we can categorize the work in the stories so that we can have a source of truth of, okay, here's how many resources or how many teams have stories open that need to complete this work. After we assign the epic, the next thing is, typical workflow progression. And this is really different on all the different teams. Different teams use different Jira projects, so it all depends on the statuses that are available within there. But our automation is smart enough to know what typical statuses there are that declares it as in progress as opposed to in a team's backlog or if the work is completed or not. So at this point, the team can just do manual transitions from different statuses that they need to, so they can track the work, know if something needs to be reviewed for a pull request or anything like that, and then move it along as they wish. So then after the progression, it becomes the validation of the work. And this is the really nice part, is that the teams don't need to manually do this themselves. So again, we'll use Boto 3 to get the real live data in AWS. And then once we have confirmed that the work has been completed for that team, we'll actually close out the story for them so that we keep that reflection in our epic of all the work that still needs to be completed and all the work that has already been completed across all of the different teams. So once we do close that story, we also leave a comment on there that will basically just say, all resources have been remediated. Thank you for fixing this. Just so the team is aware and they have an extra message there that they can continue on to the next story that they need to work in their backlog. So that's the typical overall life of a story. Now I'll give you like a quick overview, workflow of how this all comes together. So if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see that we have, this daily block there, which basically just stating that we run this script daily. And as mentioned before, it's a Python script. And at first, it'll be kicked off. It'll connect out to the Boto 3 AWS SDK. It'll grab several different types of services, resources, and it'll sort those resources then by the team. And we, as I mentioned before, we use the team tag to be able to identify who owns what resources. And once we sort that out by the team, you can see an example on the right-hand side of a Jira story that will get created. So in this example, Team Elias needs to do a Python 2 to Python 3 upgrade. And if you look at the orange block there, the Python upgrade to version 3.7, that is just an example of the epic that is assigned to that story. And then if you look on the right-hand side, you can see that's a picture of me. Probably can't notice from that small photo, but that's how we use ServiceNow to be able to figure out who the engineering lead is of this team. In this case, it is me. So some of the different integrations that you'll notice here is Bodo 3 that we use to gather the AWS metadata, Jira API to create, update, and close the stories, and then also ServiceNow to figure out who to assign the stories to. And another way, after the story gets created, be integrated with Amazon DynamoDB so that we can update those stories, create the stories, and close the stories. By keeping that information up to date within that database, on each different run, it can review the delta between those runs and know what stories we have open for each of the different cloud controls that we have. So Joe, I will throw it back to you for the results.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. You can go right into it. So, yeah, I mean, really, this was an amazing, experience. We iterated both on the Agile side and on the technical side. Eric's probably done 100 different variations of updating the capabilities of the automation, but we got more out of it than we ever thought. I mean, we thought we were dreaming at the beginning, and then as we realized, the capabilities and the possibilities, Eric just was able to engineer things that we didn't even think would be possible at the beginning, and it really allowed teams to take control of their compliance and their resource compliance. So what we saw was, the clear expectations are really the start of everything. Teams having the confidence to know that what they saw coming into their work streams and their workflows was what they needed to work on, not shifting through emails, not having to hunt and peck, really providing them with the information they needed. We also saw iteration and roadmap planning. I'll kind of come back to that because we have an image for it. But prevention versus remediation is something I'll talk about there in a second. We had that accountability. So all of a sudden it went from maybe one person seeing that email to the whole team being involved. And Eric mentioned ServiceNow. So, getting, product people involved, getting engineering people involved, getting the Agile people involved, making sure that there was a conversation around it and that it wasn't going to slip through the cracks, making sure that everyone was talking about it and making sure that it was planned to get done. And so that they could take action on it. Teams could take action on it. And then the ability to evaluate the remediation effort. So getting feedback, we talked about kind of the iterative approach, being able to make updates, talk about how long it took to get done. Did the teams have the right information? And if we need to do it again, making sure we incorporate the updates that are needed to make it even more efficient and seamless. Easier tracking through defined our system of record. So having that single source of truth and making sure that we had easy visibility for leaders and even teams themselves into where we were with the process, and peace of mind. So the image I want to talk about really quickly, going back to iteration and roadmap planning. One of the coolest things was teams started not just remediating single instances or single resources. They started planning on how they could do preventative measures, and so implementing engineering solutions so that things would get rehydrated automatically, or they wouldn't even start or have these stories anymore because it would kind of remediate before it even became any type of thing that needed to be noticed. So that was really cool. So no more band-aids. They were creating solutions that were robust and long-term. And then of course the obligatory peace of mind shot of someone meditating was the way we wanted to close this out, knowing that your cloud resources are remediated, safe, and that that you were able to attend to all of them. So that was the results we noticed. We were it was just a really cool journey. Has been a cool journey, still is, because we're still making updates and improvements to it week by week as we get feedback. I'm not sure what the next slide is actually. What is it? Okay, so we will go into questions and conversations, and that will be a live session. So we're really excited to see you live, talk about the presentation. Really hope you enjoyed it. Great opportunity to do this, and really ecstatic. I'll hand it over to Eric for the last word before we sign off.
Yes, I just want to say thank you again. We're really excited to have this opportunity to speak to you all today. We look forward to you guys sending us any more messages if you have any other questions, or if you just want to have a conversation about what we've built here. Our emails are listed here. You can add us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We look forward to hearing from you all.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.